Okay, we ready? Good morning, everybody. Beautiful sunny day out there. It's supposed to be in the 40s today. Quite the Super Bowl last night. You got to give the Patriots credit, whether you love them or hate them. I know there's a lot on, maybe there's more on the hate side, I'm not sure, but it seems like there's a lot of diversity out there of opinion, but you got to give them credit for a heck of a comeback. It was great to see a former Badger really excel in the game, set a new record for number of touchdowns scored by an individual. So quite the game yesterday. We got a lot on the agenda today, so let's move into new colleague introductions. Gerald, you want to start?
Good morning, everyone. We have several. We have LaTanya Dunn, started as the Milwaukee County Break Systematic Program Assistant, January 13th. We have Grace Aaron, Communication and Social Media Assistant, also in Milwaukee, started on January 18th. From South Milwaukee County to Washington County Food-Wise Program on January 15th. Kayla Visti started as the interim 4-H Youth Development Educator in Allegheny County on January 15th. Pam DeBele, Plain County Interim 4-H Youth Development Program Advisor, started on January 15th. Jill Frederis, in Notion, Wisline County Food-Wise Nutrition Educator, started on January 15th. And Mary Theory in Milwaukee County started on February 1st as the interim 4-H STEM curriculum specialist.
Wow, thanks, Gerald. Quite the list. And welcome, Leah, Tanya, Grace, Sarah, Kayla, Pam, Jill, and Mary. Looking forward to working with you in Cooperative Extension. Next, Matt Hansen.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We have one new colleague to announce in the Southwest region, and that's Amanda Kostman. She'll be starting as an interim family living educator in Walworth County beginning today. She's transferred from the Lincoln County office where she worked for a number of years as both family living educator, 60% time, and 4-H coordinator, 40% time. So welcome, Amanda, to the Southwest region.
Yes, welcome, Amanda. Look forward to working with you in the family living program. Will Andreessen, do you have an announcement?
On the call. This is Jennifer Brindley in the North Central Region office, and we do have one new person to announce. He's not actually new. Jim Resick, who had retired recently, has come back to help us out in Shawano County in the interim CRD educator role. He started on February 1st.
Thanks, Jennifer, and welcome back, Jim. Look forward to working with you. Obviously, you're a valued resource in that area, and it'll be great to have you help us, particularly through this transition period. Any other introductions?
This is Patrick Robinson. I work for the Conrad Program Office. I'd like to welcome Travis Olson. He started on February 1st as the Program and Physical Administrative Specialist for the Conrad Program.
Thanks, Patrick, and welcome, Travis, to the Conrad Program and to Co-op. Any other introductions?
This is John Exo. I'm not sure if this has been announced prior, but we'd like to welcome Val Damstra to the Natural Resource Educators rank. Val's taking over a project position that was previously held by Betty Staffer working on the Lake Superior Landscape Restoration Partnership.
Thanks, John, and welcome, Val, to Cooperative Extension. Others? Okay, not hearing any. Let's move on. We have a lot of updates around the Next Generation project. Before we get into those details, I want to talk a little bit about the performance review process. I've talked about this on previous Wislines. Deanna Schneider has done a great job working with Sharon Klowitter, the RDs, PDs, and the academic department chairs to develop what's going to be basically an electronic form. And it's for supervisors to fill out if they want to nominate somebody for merit, a merit award. As I mentioned, we're going to be giving out both base merit awards and one-time merit awards this year. And this form is really to help standardize that process. And folks should remember that we're really talking, 20 to 30% of colleagues that will receive those awards. That's not to say that everybody's doing a great job out there. It's just at some point you need to come up with what that number is when you're allocating merit. Again, this isn't part of a pay plan. That's a separate process and separate discussion. But those forms, I'll send those out. The link to that hopefully later today. Supervisors will have those forms. And the idea is that it's basically a drop-down menu to fill out those forms, and you document why an individual is meritorious and deserving of a merit award for their work in 2016. So more to come on that hopefully later today. I know some of you have been conducting your performance reviews already. We decided that with this form, it would be relatively easy to go back and fill out this form for the past year. Second item is Capital Connections. That was scheduled for April 20th. We decided to cancel Capital Connections this year. There's three primary reasons for that. One is workload. It's a major undertaking, and we're obviously in the middle of a reorganization, spending a lot of time on that. Another one was the finances of doing it. It costs a fair amount of money to put on Capital Connections. We decided that with our current budget situation, maybe it'd be good to skip this year. And then the third reason was we're really going to be in the middle of rolling out options. We're not sure how our constituents are going to respond to those options. Rather than set up some awkward conversations, we decided it would be better to postpone and hold on Capital Connections for this year. Any questions about those two before we move on? Okay, let's move into the next generation update. And I apologize, I will be kind of looking at a script during much of this. Part of that's just so I make sure I cover the details of all the things that we want to talk about today. And I should point out that this is really going to be the first of many rollouts of recommendations, trying to get feedback on those recommendations. And we're going to really try to have weekly communications, Friday communications with recommendations, with feedback options. And this is really kind of that first major rollout. One of the reasons we're doing this today is that I didn't want to present this to the WCA tomorrow. As you know, the Chancellor and I are scheduled to go meet with the WCA meeting tomorrow at the concourse. And rather than having them hear about this first, we really wanted our colleagues to hear about what these options are that the integrated work group is coming out with. So we're going to cover two major aspects. One is an update on the operational assessments, and the other one is to inform you about the recommendations and the schedule for feedback that we have planned for the next couple of weeks. We should point out that the recommendations for feedback, that these are recommendations of feedback. These are not final decisions. We want to solicit feedback prior to making final decisions. We won't be able to provide really a timeline for the position changes. That really needs to go through the feedback process, and that's really more part of the implementation process. Having said that, our goal is really to start implementing. The major implementation will start on July 1st after we go through these recommendations and options and feedback process over the next few months. We also aren't in a position right now to negotiate with counties. I've heard from a lot of you that that's a major concern. Our goal would be to have that ready by April when counties really start getting serious about their budgets. So that's why we're starting to roll this out now, trying to get feedback and continue to work on what those options will be moving forward. Input to the project has influenced it. As you all know, the 9 groups completed their work in November. Integration work group began its work in November. And as you all know, cooperative extension is organized both around geography and disciplines. And today we're really focusing on the geography portion of that organization and what that looks like moving forward. The integrated work group is still working through the reports and still working on what those disciplinary recommendations will look like moving forward, how we're organized around disciplines. So the IWG, a little bit about the process. The integration work group makes recommendations to the project sponsors. So that's Steve Wildeck, Aaron Brower, and myself. And then the sponsors send those to the chancellor, who makes a decision on those recommendations. I just want to remind folks, please make sure you have your mute on. We're getting a little bit of feedback on the phone. So implementation really begins after the approval from the chancellor, and this is going to be a rolling implementation. We don't foresee this being July 1, everything's going to occur. There's actually going to be certain things that have to build. So some decisions will be made early in the process, particularly around hiring. If we need to hire folks into certain positions, we're going to want to do that earlier on. So we kind of stage things in a reasonable manner rather than, oh, we're going to flip the light switch and everything's going to happen July 1st. That's not realistic. Many aspects of the implementation will require a period of transition. So again, we're going to have to look long-term on what that transition phase looks like. And we're still in the process of determining what we're going to do, but that transition is also being talked about and how do we actually implement this over time. I guess other kind of general points, the sponsors have made it very clear that we're not declaring a fiscal emergency and we're not doing anything that would cause program discontinuation. So I know that's a question that's on that has come up multiple times, and that's not part of this reorganization. As far as county budget planning, we still hope to present counties with options in April. Not February, April, sorry about that. And what we'll need to do is get input from individual county staffing plans. We're going to continue the practice, probably the first thing. We're going to continue the practice of contracting with each county individually. We're putting that process together over the next several months. The goal is really to have those individual conversations with counties and develop options to fill their priorities. We hope our goal is that counties will keep their funding relatively similar to what it's been in past years. I don't know if you guys want to chime in on any of this.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were doing that.
The operational assessments, let's talk about those first. I said there were two things we're going to talk about: operational assessments and the recommendations and feedback. So operational assessments, those are moving in parallel with the integrated work group. The operational assessments are being led by the Huron consulting firm. And those operational assessments really focus on things that are internal to the organization. As you saw last week, the assessment came out on our HR in cooperative extension, and we're going to be reorganizing HR based on that. So moving our HR into the Office of Human Resources institution. The first implementation, so that's really the first implementation of those administrative changes. The Office of Human Resources will have a team of HR managers, HR assistants, and specialists, and those are going to serve cooperative extension. Those recruitments for the managers have begun already, and the assistants will follow that, and the specialists will actually be the last part of that hiring. Those specialists will actually be shared across multiple divisions. Those won't be co-op specific specialists. Our current co-op extension human resources staff have the ability to compete for those new positions as we move forward. As part of that, we're not going to engage our human resources and professional development planning work groups as we had originally envisioned for the project. However, I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, professional development, that seems different. We do understand that we really do need to look at that. That's very important for the organization. So we're working on trying to figure out how we address professional development moving forward. Huron is nearing their completion of the work with the budget office, our financial services, and Aaron, Steve, and I are working with Huron to develop what implementation options could look like. Currently, the budget office director position is vacant, and as many of you know, Howard Fenton will be retiring this spring. So we're trying to figure out how we staff that and make sure we keep service for the organization moving forward under a new model. And I should point out that each one of those operational assessments does not result in it does not have the same results. So it's not like we're going to centralize everything in the central college and extension office. It's really looking at how do we function most effectively, what's most efficient for the organization when we go through those operational assessments. Last week, there were 3 new operational assessments launched: the marketing and communications, program development, and IT. And I want to just thank everybody who's participated in the process to this point. There'll be a fair number of interviews and other types of contacts being made as we go through that operational assessment over the next month or so. So now let's move on to the bulk of the presentation today, which is really around recommendations and feedback. As far as the feedback, everyone is welcome to provide feedback, but these recommendations are really focused on our counties and our county contracts, and that's just the first part of what we're going through. It's not like that's all we're going to focus on, but we decided with the county budgets coming up in April, we really needed to start figuring out what we're going to look like moving forward. And also contracting arrangements with campuses and tribes work differently than they do at the county. So we're looking at those also, but those are a separate part of what the integration work group is addressing. The integration work group seeks feedback on these future aspects of the recommendations from partners, and there could be targeted feedback opportunities as we move through this process. So as I said, it's going to be a rolling out of options over time and feedback, and we may try to target some specific constituents as we roll out different aspects. A little bit about the communications timeline. As I mentioned, we have the WCA meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, and then there's also a meeting with the executives on Wednesday. So that'll be occurring this week. That's been part of our goal, is to really have something to present to them during these during this legislative WCA meeting. The survey is going to be available on the project website. And again, this is a survey for individuals, and that's going to start February 9th. And so we'll be soliciting feedback and the recommendations that we'll go through today. And anyone who's interested in providing feedback may complete the survey. So the survey is going to be a set of pointed questions and really structured around the recommendations. The goal is to close that survey on February 23rd. We're also going to have daily Q&A conference calls. Those are going to be 30-minute conference calls from 8:30 to 9 between on weekdays, don't call on the weekends, on weekdays only between February 10th and February 23rd. So if folks want to call in, we'll have the project team there to be able to answer questions. We're also going to have a Q&A with me on February 15th. That'll be from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And we'll start to address some of those questions today, I'm sure. Then we're also looking at the possibility of an additional video chat that would be co-presented with WCA probably in the next few weeks. So more to be developed on that issue. Okay, so recommendations. So the first recommendation is that we want to maintain an extension office in every county. We recognize the value of that local presence. This has been a huge issue that's come up from our county partners. So we want to maintain that while keeping distances in mind. How do you keep the shortest distance possible between the people of Wisconsin and the extension staff? And we really feel that that's having a county presence and a tribal presence moving forward. In return, we're asking that counties provide dedicated office space for our staff members that the county is co-funding, along with necessary office supplies and access to classroom space for teaching, consistent branding, etc. Very similar to what we have now, and we want to co-brand all our work at the counties with the county, realizing that they're an important partner. Proximity, we want to maintain that shortest distance, so hence having that local presence is really important for us moving forward, as we really want to focus on those local issues and relative education. Accessibility, having that local office provides maximum accessibility without having to drive long distances for the people of the state, particularly when you get into some of the larger counties or remote counties of the state. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we're visible. So, and that's a partnership really between us and the counties, that the county is visible and prominent and continuing to promote educational programming and services in that Wisconsin idea. So it's not this isn't all co-op. It's called co-op because we're in that partnership with the counties, and the counties really value that educational programming. So that's kind of the office in every county summary. We're going to restructure our geographic administration. We recommend appointing one area extension director to lead each of the areas. So if you remember correctly, that map on February 10th has 23 areas distributed across the state. Some details around those positions. We're recommending that those positions be 100% funded by Cooperative Extension. They're going to be responsible for managing the relationship with county governments and county-based staff. And again, we talked about having relationships with each county. They'll have ultimate hiring authority for staff in their counties. They'll lead programming efforts in the counties they oversee by identifying needs in the communities and matching county, regional, and statewide resources to address those needs. They'll also develop program priorities and staffing plans with the county governments. So we have 23 of those area extension directors distributed around the state. They're going to report to 2 assistant deans. There'll be roughly 10 to 15 extension directors each that would report to those deans of cooperative extension. And those 2 deans would report directly to the dean of cooperative extension. Local funding would be focused on local programming. Because these directors will be funded by cooperative extension, county funding would go directly to the staff that we have hired that are delivering the programming in the counties. Area extension directors would be a conduit to the broader cooperative extension network, linking counties to regional and statewide resources, including UW campuses and cooperative extension centers. Area extension directors would be committed to that area success by dedicated to managing and administering extension programs in each county, and they would not split their time between management, program, and scholarship. This is really kind of an account manager, administrator for those areas. Actually, can you bring up the slide, Tony? The first slide. So part of this is also how do we reduce layers of administration. So right now, this is how we're organized administratively. You can see we have a dean, associate dean, regional directors, and department heads. What we're looking at moving to, if you can move to the second slide, Tony, is having 3 levels of administration. So you have a dean, assistant deans, and then you have the area directors that would be distributed around the state. So we're looking at moving from 100 staff to approximately 30 staff, 25 to 30 staff. And really, but that's a little bit of a misnomer in that a lot of those other positions were part-time department head positions. What we're really looking at is moving from about 35 FTE to 26 FTE, a little bit more on that 35 probably. I don't actually account the associate dean and dean in that number. But we're looking at a significant reduction of probably 10 FTE going to this model. This is different than the February 10th Chancellor's memo because we are clear about eliminating 2 existing roles. We're going to be eliminating the regional director roles and the county department head roles and changing really the focus of those area directors to be an account manager, helping the counties to meet their objectives and connect with resources at campuses across the state and some other positions we'll be talking about. We understand that people currently in these roles will have a lot of questions about implementing this recommendation. Heidi has actually had conference calls with department heads and regional directors prior to this discussion, but I'm sure there'll be more questions coming up. And this is a recommendation at this point, so we'll open this up for comment before making any final and detailed decisions about that. So connecting counties with regional and statewide resources. It's the goal of cooperative extension to continue to invest in positions based at UW campuses, providing a link between locally based educators and research that's being conducted on those UW system campuses. What's going to be new is that cooperative extension will provide access to regional outreach and regional positions that will be primarily funded by cooperative extension. These positions may be housed in counties, tribal offices, on UW campuses, or in extension centers, but will serve the broad audiences based on local, regional, and statewide needs. So examples include extension specialists, those would be faculty positions, and then also outreach programmers. So these are academic staff positions. The idea is that these positions serve broader areas than individual counties. Counties and tribes will be able to access the educational programs even if they are not funded or housing those positions directly. There's going to be a lot of specialization. This is something we heard from the surveys we did. These regional positions will be very specialized in their areas of focus, enabling counties and tribes to access a broader and deeper array of educational programs and specialists. Flexibility and speed. Regional positions will enable counties and tribes to address emerging issues through new or adaptive programs quickly and efficiently. The intent is to refocus our faculty to cover broader geographies and be more focused on disciplinary content and scholarship. In the future, county positions are intended to be academic staff, but faculty may be in those roles during the transition. This is what I talk about, is that we're really looking at a fairly long transition period, really utilizing our current staff and looking at this new model. The transition period will be required to bring current faculty into those regional roles, as well as academic staff into those outreach programmer roles. So moving on, so differentiating county-based educational positions. In addition to the regional and statewide positions listed above, we're looking at creating 3 different roles in the future that better align job responsibilities with educational qualifications. So those 3 roles would be an associate extension educator. Those are staff with high school diplomas or bachelor's degrees that focus on teaching, delivering programs, and providing educational services throughout the county or tribal area. These staff will leverage curricula and educational materials developed by statewide resources based on the UW campuses and extension centers. So that's associate extension educators. Another position in the counties would be extension educators. These are staff with bachelor's degrees or master's degrees that focus on adapting programs developed by statewide resources to be most relevant to the residents of the county tribal entity, and delivering those programs to the residents of that area, or that county. I shouldn't say area, that's confusing with our area delineation. So we have extension educators, and the third type of position that would be located in the county are called program coordinators. Those are staff with bachelor's degrees or master's degrees that focus on providing administrative and operational support to volunteers and educators, delivering a specified program within a county tribal structure. So that's a major significant change. So we're looking at those 3 positions, those associate extension educators, and program coordinators. And again, this is a process on how we would move through to this new model over time. As far as alignment, job responsibilities would be better aligned with the qualifications of staff. So we often hear from counties, oh, we don't want faculty for those positions, or we don't need faculty. Well, that's true in some cases, and that's not true in others. And we're really trying to tease out, when is that really appropriate, when is it not? So rather than have one size fits all, let's try to think about how do we increase the number of positions we have to meet the needs out there. As far as alignment, I just talked about that. Flexibility. This will allow for flexibility in how programs are delivered and moves away from that one size fits all approach. County tribal investment, primarily focused within the counties and tribes. These county tribal funded positions will continue to focus on the needs of our county and tribal partners, but will, without having the added responsibility of unrelated administrative tasks. That's going to be taken over by the area extension director positions, which are funded by cooperative extension. We foresee an increased applicant pool. There will be new opportunities for local residents to apply for positions within the organization that were not there before because of minimal qualification barriers. Again, we anticipate changes like this will take in some cases, a lengthy transition period. We're not going to flip the switch and do this July 1st. Moving along, sharing educational positions across counties. If you could bring up the next slide, Tony. So as already occurring in many areas, counties and tribes may choose to share extension educators, associate extension educators, and program coordinators across boundaries. So if you look at the top of this slide, you can see we have an example of an educator, extension educator in one county and works specifically in that county. However, if you look at example 2, you may have, a county may have a need for only a half of a position. So you may want to share that position across 2 counties within an area. So there, an educator would be working both in County B and County A. It would be up to the area extension director to negotiate with those counties and get the funding in place for that sharing across counties. If you could move to the next slide, Tony. You look at example 3, we have staff that are dedicated to all 4 county areas. And we originally, in some of the models that came out, we had proposed this for all positions, and it was evident based on the feedback received that there would be so much driving and so much maybe unnecessary windshield time that this is an option, but this would involve sharing across, for example, in this example, across 4 counties of a particular educator. What we're really trying to point out here is that we have flexibility, that there's flexibility in how we allocate those positions and fund those positions moving forward. And I think the 4th example really brings that home, in that just because you're within an area doesn't mean that you can't share resources across areas. We heard that from a lot of our county partners. Well, what if I want to work with the county next door and they're not in my area? That's something that would be negotiated with those counties, those individual counties. And this will require us to make sure we have great communication with those area extension directors that are serving multiple areas moving forward. But I think these 4 slides really kind of show those options for sharing and for hopefully maximizing the resources that the counties may have. They may not have enough money to invest in a full-time position, so they may want to partner with a neighboring county that has a similar need. Again, identifying those needs is going to be really important, and working with those counties to make sure that they're getting the services they need and that we have the right type of expertise in place. Let's see. So the idea here is that staff could specialize further than they currently do and share their expertise across multiple counties. So for example, family living educators provide programming like parenting and financial literacy to individual counties. In the future, there could be parenting educators who provide more specialized programming to multiple counties and tribes. So maybe it's just around that parenting and not the financial part of that. So starting to specialize in what we're providing. This also provides flexibility in staffing. Counties and tribes no longer need to purchase a full FTE for every program. And specialization, by broadening geographic areas, we're going to allow our colleagues to have more specialization in the areas that they're trained in, offering counties and tribes the opportunity to be more accurately meet their programming needs at the local level. And then lastly, cost sharing. Counties and tribes can share the cost for staff with other counties or other tribes. So moving on from that, and I know this is a lot to take in. I'm not sure how we're going to do this in 15 minutes tomorrow. Obviously, we're going into a lot more detail here today than we're going to go in to with the WCA tomorrow, but I think that's only fair to all of you out there. So establishing new agreements between counties and cooperative extension. So this really gets into that contracting. One of the new things we're looking at is having a multi-year MOU, or memorandum of understanding, with each county to supplement the annual contracts by standardizing processes, expectations, and lines of authority. So this MOU would identify the types of positions, services, and programs cooperative extension can provide to the counties, and the types of services and resources counties will provide to cooperative extension. So this is really more something that we would want to have standardized across the state that counties would agree to. We don't want to create, we want to have kind of our standard, here's what we offer, here's our package. We don't want to create something different for every area or every county. Having said that, some of that sharing would occur, and there is some flexibility in programming, but we do want to have a foundation that's common across the whole state. General approval process for hiring, authority for new staff approval processes, those types of things. Our expectations are outlined in that MOU. So how do the counties and cooperative extension interact around those issues? Area extension directors will develop an annual contract with the county. So we'll continue with our annual contracts, identifying the FTEs and types of positions the county is funding. So for example, could be a full-time 4-H youth development program coordinator that the counties agree to, that's one of their needs, one of the positions they want to fill. These contracts will not contain the names of staff, but the positions. So the positions and the FTE. As far as funding, we're recommending a flat fee structure. So the fees that each county pays would be standard fees set by cooperative extension based on the discipline and position level. So full-time 4-H youth development program coordinator could cost $25,000, where a full-time master gardener program coordinator could cost $30,000. Those are just random examples. So don't put any weight in those specific examples, but that's the idea of where you start adjusting what you're charging. And some of the reason for that is that there's a lot of different costs also associated with those positions. And so some of those are, these positions, they not only include salary and fringe, but we want to have that fee include travel, some technology. We're still trying to figure out exactly what the technology looks like. We do want to have a standard IT platform, but we also realize that the counties provide a lot of valuable technology support. So we're trying to work through and figure out, and there's an operational assessment going on related to IT that should shed a lot of light on that. Other things that would be included in that fee, professional development for each staff member, so a flat fee. And that then also means that the counties won't be required to set aside money in their budgets for travel, for additional technology costs, or for professional development as they currently do. So of those, the technology one is the one we're still wrestling with, and those colleagues in the counties, I'm sure, can understand why that's a bit of a challenge for us. But really getting that standard platform will be important. So these position fees will be relatively standard across the state, but cooperative extension will modify the fees charged to each county based on economic indicators to account for differences in cost of living across the state, across the counties in the state. What that looks like, we're not sure. We're still working through how you come up with a standard metric to do that. But that's getting at a little bit of both the cost of living for our colleagues across the state, and also for the ability for counties to pay for positions. So we're still exploring those two areas. Given that counties are paying standard fees for each position instead of specific staff, if cooperative extension decides to grant raises or promotions to staff serving in the counties, the fees that counties pay will remain the same. So they would not be adjusted within a year. We will want to adjust those over time. Obviously, we're not going to charge the same in 2018 as we're going to charge in 2028. So we will need to increase those to reflect cost of living and other adjustments. Likewise, if county extension and the county decide to change the staff serving in a specific county, there is, let me start over. Likewise, if cooperative extension and the county decide to change the staff serving a specific county, the fee that the county pays would remain the same unless there's a change in the FTE level. So there's no, well, we're going to hire somebody at a lower, coming in at a lower level. The fee stays the same. We're going to bring in somebody with a lot of experience. We're not going to expect the counties to change what they pay within a year. Standardization benefit of this is that both cooperative extension and the counties will clearly understand their expectations, responsibilities, and lines of authority. As far as clarity, the counties will now have full information of and insight into the suite of programs and type of staff available to meet local needs. As far as standardization, counties will now know their all-in costs for the contracts with cooperative extension at the beginning of the year. We know there's a lot of pushback when we start changing our budgets mid-year. And the only way that would change is if they decided to either increase or decrease their FTE for those their positions in their counties. We foresee a reduced administrative burden. Counties will no longer need to offer technical and financial support to cooperative extension staff and will not need to manage separate budgets for travel and professional development. The only one I would just put a little highlight would be the IT part of that. We're still working through what that would look like. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, I know that was a ton of information, a lot to go through. I really felt it was important for us to get that out to you before we released it to the counties. I just think that's really important. And I should point out that these are, again, recommendations. We're trying to get feedback. The feedback will be set up on Thursday for these, and that's going to be a 2-week period of time. And I also want to thank all the work groups. I went through this. This isn't, me sitting down and coming up with this. There were 9 work groups that helped develop much of the recommendations, operational assessments that are ongoing, and in particular the IWG, which has been just meeting unbelievable amount of time, up to 15 hours a week in meetings, trying to come up with what these options look like moving forward. I think we can open it up for questions. What time is it?
We're at 9:42 and we have a number of questions. Multiple questions about how tenure is going to be addressed with these new positions, how they address people who are untenured, tenured people who are now going to be looking at positions that no longer have tenure, and how the 3 roles look like they are at the county level are all academic staff positions. Is extension specialist the only faculty position? How many do you envision?
Yes, that's correct. Extension specialist would be the only faculty position. We're still working through what those numbers look like and what the ratio would be. As far as those tenured faculty, we're not doing either financial or major programming changes, so faculty will retain their faculty right. And even if they moved into those county positions, they would still be faculty. That gets into that transition I talked about. Maybe ultimately those positions become academic staff, but during this transition period, we really want to work with our existing colleagues to figure out how we can find the best role positions for our colleagues moving forward. As far as untenured faculty, we're still working through that. My goal by holding positions, and I shouldn't just say non-tenured faculty, non-tenured faculty, academic staff, and university staff, we're working through this, holding positions, and our goal is to try to have as many positions available for our existing staff and try to be humane as possible as we go through this implementation process. So, as I said, July 1, we're going to start making those changes. Operationally, there may not be a lot of changes in your particular position depending on which role you move into in the new structure.
There was a couple questions as far as the extension educators go. Are these going to be 100% county funded or blended, similar to the current model? And then also in regards to the area managers, will these in essence be micromanaging the programming for educators?
Yeah, so those are 2 questions. As far as funding for the educators, we would look for the counties to fund those at a higher rate than they currently are. So I don't foresee the 60-40 model being in place. And part of the reason for that is that these positions are located within the county offices. If we start asking counties to fund positions such as the area extension director or the specialist positions, our concern is that if they're not located in the office over time, we're going to have a fair amount of pushback. So we'd actually like them to pay a much higher proportion of those positions moving forward. What that number is, we're still working through that. Those are a lot of details. We're still trying to get our hands around what the budget and how these numbers would work out. But I wouldn't foresee that being over 50% would be county funded for those positions.
So Carl, let me just ask, that breakdown won't be a negotiation with the county, though it'll be determined in the fixed fee
Correct.
rate that we need to get to recoup the funding.
That's a good point. So all those positions would have a flat fee associated with them. So it's really kind of behind the scenes, what percent does that flat fee make up for the positions? And it won't be for a specific position, it would be across the organization. So if it's 30,000 for associate extension educator, then we behind the scenes would have to figure out how we're going to pay the full amount for that. So a lot of that's really calculated internally. By going through this flat fee rate, it keeps them from having to address raises, having to address promotions, because that's all built into that flat fee. So good point, Dave.
Would you please clarify, where will the faculty positions that would become specialists or outreach coordinators be housed, and how are they funded?
Yeah, so the faculty positions, the specialist positions moving forward, what we'd like to do is we'd like to continue to have many of those housed in the counties around the state. So that's another negotiation discussion that would need to take place. Obviously, we'll have those specialist positions in our centers based on campuses also. But our goal is that we maintain faculty distributed across the state. So you may be located in County X, but you could be serving 3 or 4 areas around cranberry production, for example. So you could be serving much larger area, working with the extension educators and the program specialists within the counties to deliver programs to address needs. But I don't foresee those all being pulled back to Madison or anything crazy like that. Those are still distributed positions across the state.
Carl, the second part of the first question about, sounds like there'll be micromanagement of programming area or local level.
Yeah, I don't think it's micromanaging. I think that area extension director really will be challenged, to be honest, to coordinate across multiple counties and multiple programming areas. So I think that individual is going to need to understand programming across our program areas and identify the needs. I don't foresee that individual being able to actually micromanage the programming that's taking place within the counties.
So there was a question asked online about the form mentioned by Carl, was for performance reviews or for merit pay only. Deanna answered that. The form is only for the recommendations for merit. The SIPR-FAR process will still be conducted locally for reviews. There was also a question that was asked about actual technology, laptop, smartphones, and the like. It's a little early for that. We're going to be working on what our administrative technology needs are and determine from there what recommendations we'll be making. Michelle Tinneman asked a couple questions. One is, what is the outreach programmer's job? And let's just start with that.
Well, the outreach programmer, in the work of the integration work group, they identified some conditions that would need to be in place for the position to be a faculty role. One of those was a high need for scholarship. Another was long-term stability of funding, and there were a couple other conditions that we said this is a role that definitely requires faculty and the type of scholarship. There may be similar roles performed, maybe a high level of scholarship, but not long-term stability of funding. Or maybe there's it's a longer term project, but there's more of operational and delivery focus and less of a scholarly focus. So those are 2 types of positions that could perform similar functions, but in one case, the conditions aren't met for it to be a faculty position.
Could you talk a little bit about the role of the current county support staff and what's the vision for their roles in the future?
Yeah, so our goal is to maintain that support from our counties. So maintain that support structure that's in place. So that would be, actually some of the analysis shows that counties actually provide about $11 million in space and in support for cooperative extension. And our goal is that we maintain that support moving forward.
There was a question asked online, if counties are paying a higher percentage for the educator, does this mean that they will have more control, i.e. micromanaging educators at the county level?
Yeah, so the question about counties having control, part of the reason we're putting that MOU in place is really to outline what cooperative extension is providing in the counties and really to have a clear delineation of what expectations are for both parties. And we're also not tying that to individuals. We're tying that to the services being provided. So it's no longer, you know, I don't like what John's doing, so we're not going to fund John anymore. Now it's, this is the service you're getting. If you have a problem with the service you're getting, you can work with the area extension administrator to address that. But it's no longer tied to individuals. And those expectations of those individuals is really outlined in the MOU of what the programming that's being provided by cooperative extension.
Will the focuses of the specialists be determined by the new area directors? How will those specialists roles be determined?
Yeah, that's something where, you know, that's the other part that I mentioned at the beginning, really the discipline focus. And that's something else that's being worked through. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have more information about that. We'll have some options around that. But the idea would be that they would be aligned with some type of thematic-based programming. So if you're working in dairy, that you would actually be part of some type of organized group around dairy in the state. So that would be more of an administrative line around disciplinary approaches. And so we're working through that, and hopefully we'll have more on that within the next 2 to 3 weeks. But you should think about this as this is really focused on geography. How disciplines are related to this is a whole different layer that we need to overlay onto this. So we're not just going to put associate educators out there and not have them affiliated with any type of discipline moving forward. So there's a whole another foot to drop around that, I would say.
It's a great question that came through. Will we be providing any support to assist counties with visioning sessions in order to determine what their priorities will be when it comes to funding educators?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a major job for the area extension director. That's really the account manager that needs to work with each individual county. I think what we had proposed last year was roughly outlined is that we would have those counties all come together and have like a super committee, and we've abandoned that idea. What we're recommending is that person works with each county on needs, and by understanding the needs of all the counties, then you start having an opportunity for maybe some sharing like we had in those graphics. And also working, those area extension directors need to work with extension directors in the surrounding areas because there very well could be sharing on counties, particularly counties that are right next to each other in different areas. So I think there's going to be a lot of that needed moving forward, and some of that will need to start this year.
Another question asked, will the Dean's Office still support those documents that have passed SRP this year?
Yes, so we'll continue with the process. So we're not stopping any of that. It's not, oh, we're shutting that down. We'll continue to move through that this year as we move into implementation.
will we need to be reapplying for positions as this unfolds, or will it be more reassignment predicated on areas of strength and programming?
It's a very good question, and I don't have the answer to that. That really gets into implementation, and we're just starting to get into that. That's not really the charge of the IWG. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like. Obviously, we don't want to, completely flip the apple cart over. So how do we do that? Understanding where people are located, what areas their strengths are in, and how do we get the best match. The actual process for doing that we haven't figured out yet, but we want to try to do that as fair and as simple as possible, I would say, moving forward. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Dave?
No, I mean, it might be situational or dependent on whether it's actually a very different position that's being created that we have none of, or a very similar position like a faculty role, and we're just calling it something else and changing the geography. So it might be how it's approaching implementation might be situational and conditional on what we move forward with.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of that's also, this is a transition period. So, we talk about those new positions in the counties. Those, we're going to have faculty that are going to be in some of those positions, and that's fine, and that's what we're planning for, and I think that's the appropriate way to move forward. We're not going to flip a switch and say, okay, everybody in a county has to be academic staff, because that's what the new model says. That's where we really get into this glide pattern. We're developing something that may not be implemented for 5 years or longer, but how do we get ourselves to that point?
So we've had about 3 or 4 similar questions in regards to counties' priorities, accountability and such. To kind of paraphrase and put them together, as county needs change, will they be given allowances to restructure positions? In addition, will there be any checks and balances where a county will have to agree to a certain term of time for funding positions?
You want to take those?
I'll try, and then Carl and Heidi correct me. But so we're trying to build flexibility into the model, and the area director role is really was really framed around the role of an account manager to kind of work with counties and look at what are the county's immediate and/or long-term needs, and then to broker some of the disciplinary resources and research to fill those county positions. So I wouldn't see that counties need to completely change overnight, but it would be the area director's responsibility to continually keep up to date and renegotiate those contracts annually. And I would hope that there would be some stability in that process. But if a new issue came up in a county, let's say something like community health or criminal justice, or we've had many issues come up over the past, that part of their job would be to broker and align resources in order to help meet that locally.
Yeah, and I think that becomes, I would say, more connected in this model. So brokering those resources involves those specialists. Those regional specialist positions are going to be really important to meeting those needs. So, for example, I was at the Northwest last week, and I heard from Wasac that the opioid issue is a huge issue, and how are we going to start helping with that? So there's an area where I could see specialists in the state really supporting local needs or area needs. That could be something that an area identifies, that this area of the state really needs help with that. So then it's really up to that account manager and some of the disciplinary positions that we haven't talked about yet, administrators, to really figure out how do they work together to bring the discipline to that geography.
Alrighty,
eligible to start applying for tenure this fall. Is it in their interest to do that? Really depends on what kind of position they get moved into. What do you recommend for those folks that are right on the cusp?
I think there's several answers to that. I think it depends on what type of position they want to be in and they're moving into. You know, some of those positions may not require tenure. I've heard from some colleagues that they don't really want to go through that process. Then I also think it just depends on the individual and what the situation is for the individual. At this point, I think that's a very good question. I think we need to think about that more. What does that look like post July 1st? But we will have faculty in the new model. We're going to continue to have tenure. We're going to continue to have faculty governance. And what that looks like, I think, remains to be seen. But I don't know that I can give you a definite answer. I think that's really going to be dependent on what their role is in the new model and what their goal is moving forward. But I will say that I think we need to have flexibility and understanding during this transition period that we're catching some people kind of in a weird spot where they're coming up for tenure, but now I'm not going to be in a tenure position, and I'm not looking at, oh, here's a definite rule, this is the way it's going to be. I think we just need to have a better understanding of where we're going and how that fits into that discussion. Sorry, I can't give a more definitive answer on that, but that's one that we'll definitely write down and think about more.
Carl, related to that, are we still going to have departments going forward, and maybe secondarily, we're still going to have program areas?
That's being worked on right now. We will have program areas. I don't know that we're going to have 4 program areas moving forward. Just trying to be as transparent as possible. We are going to maintain our programming. I mentioned that earlier, that we're not getting rid of our programming areas. So how they're structured, we're really trying to look at how can that be as efficient and effective. And that gets into that whole disciplinary line that we're still working through. Where, you know, those colleagues, those positions that we talked about, they're going to belong to a particular discipline. So how do we organize that in the future? As far as academic departments, we're looking at that. There will be academic departments. And again, I don't know that there will be 4 academic departments moving forward. I think that's something that the IWG is looking at. But we will definitely have academic departments. We're definitely going to have tenure. We're definitely going to be faculty. We're a scholarship, research, evidence-based organization, and we need to maintain that moving forward. That's part of our competitive advantage as an organization. So more to come on that. Again, those will be some recommendations. There'll be a feedback process, but what those are specifically, we're not quite there yet. I would say in the next month we'll have something out more specific about both programs and departments, academic departments.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question. One of the things that I noticed is, from a technology standpoint, we get many questions from our colleagues looking for assistance with technology programming for use in their county level. It points out an example of a field that we currently don't really cover, an extension. Using that as an example, I'm sure there are other items out there, other fields that we just don't currently cover, that there's a need for it at the county level. Is there going to be any way to include things such as that as we're making plans moving forward, where there are things that have not been traditionally covered under our traditional programming areas, but are still a need in the county?
Yeah, I think that really gets into program development and program delivery. And the IWG has talked about this a fair amount, that we need to be more intentional about that. So more intentional about how we develop programming. And part of the structure is really designed to do that. But then also the delivery. How do we become more online, more smartphone, more digital? How do we reach broader audiences? And also along with that, how do we really address those emerging issues moving forward? But that's definitely something that's being talked about. How do we weave that into each of our positions? And I think along with that, we're really looking at professional development There's areas that you mentioned there, Tony, that could involve professional development. How do we make sure that we have that available for all our colleagues? So having some type of standardized professional development funding and resources available around those areas and other areas that we want to maintain really our leading edge capacity around. I don't know if you have any, either of you two have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I'll just add that we do need to look at various types of programs and support and build those structures in, and we're looking at there's a whole third element. There's the county and geographic element, there's a disciplinary element, and then there's a program support element, and we haven't gotten to that element yet either, coming up within the next few weeks.
Yep. Okay, we're at 10:06, 10:07, maybe one more.
Okay.
And again, I will have we'll have additional sessions opened up for Q&A and discussions coming up over the next several weeks.
There's a couple questions regards to title change. What about those who are facing a 3-year review and been waiting for the chance to apply for promotion? And was county positions moving to academic staff, or these positions in holding with academic staff ability to do title changes?
So I'll make two observations, and then again let Heidi and Carl correct me. But first observation is that positions such as academic staff or university staff or faculty are system-wide position classifications. Therefore, they have their criteria, which are criteria for promotion, either academic staff title change or faculty rank change, or within university staff. And so if we have those positions, we're part of those broader system-wide criteria. So nothing really has changed in that regard. And then the second thing, I've said this a lot on the project, but nothing has changed until it's actually been changed, a decision has been made and something has been changed. So in the meantime, I'm going on the assumption that all those processes that we have in place, such as faculty promotions or 3-year reviews or those type of things, are ongoing unless another system is put in place, and Carl would be announcing that.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would say continue on. And again, in the future, we're still going to have university staff, academic staff, and faculty. Those titles we talked about, those are working titles within those different categories.
I know you said one, but there's one other question we've had from multiple people in regards to the email that went out actually as we started this meeting from Chancellor Sandine in regards to her being a finalist for a different position.
Oh. Yes. Chancellor Sandine is a finalist for a system position at the University of Minnesota. She's interviewing for that position. She's one of 4 finalists. So she's interviewing for that position tomorrow and Wednesday. So as part of that, I will be presenting to the WCA and meeting with the WCA regarding these options both tomorrow and Wednesday. The chancellor called and asked me if I would do that on her behalf, and I said I'd be happy to do that. So if you see that change, that I'm actually the one that's presenting, that's the reason for it. And it's a great opportunity for Chancellor Sandine. It's a system position, statewide system leadership position. And again, she's one of 4 finalists. We don't want to get the cart before the horse. She did commit this morning that she's still committed to this process and that this is going to continue to move forward. And if she was successful in getting that position, she would, that wouldn't start until August of this year at the earliest. So. Okay, well with that, again, there'll be more listening sessions. I know we dumped a lot of stuff on you. I really appreciate everybody's patience. We'll get more information out over the next couple of weeks. And hopefully everybody can get out and enjoy a little bit of the nice weather today, as it looks like it's sunny and supposed to be in the 40s. Thanks, everybody.